Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Every week we do a process, a healing, a meditation, a mantra. Tonight, I thought we'd start this session with doing a little Q&A. So you can ask whatever question you'd like about whatever and unmute yourself, type in, and go ahead and fire away.
Yeah, go ahead, Linda.
Hey, Linda.
Hey, hi there. Wow, what a great opportunity. I have a question. I've been starting to work with, on the other front, assemblage point, and Judy and I noticed it references the heart seed. Can you talk about what the heart seed is?
Sure. So we have three seeds. Basically, if this is the higher soul, it invests a piece of itself as the incarnated soul, and then there's these three little like strings that come down, you could say. And within that, there's one in the pineal gland, which is the mental permanent seed, and then the heart seed is also known as the physical permanent seed. And then there is one in the liver or the solar plexus, which is the emotional seed. And so the heart seed is your physical blueprint, sorry about that. It's okay if I keep going. Yeah. So the physical seed is the physical blueprint, and all the aspects of your body are laid out in this physical permanent seed, as well as you could say your destiny. And when you go through life and you have your experiences, in the Christian tradition, they'll say God is keeping a book on you, right? All your experiences get imprinted on this physical permanent seed. And so as time goes by, we are able to shift that by doing acts of service and blessing and meditations. But there are some things that happen where, it's just our choices and normal everyday life, but there are certain things that happen in our lives that are in this seed that begin to manifest, like health issues, even the time when you pass and leave your body, that you have multiple death days. You have one birthday, but multiple death days. And even that is laid within the physical permanent seed. And so the death days might change depending on choices and acts of service and karma and those kinds of things. But uh, the blueprint for your overall health and your body makeup is in that seed. And so, a lot of practices do a thing where you meditate on the blue pearl, the pineal gland, which is there's a mental permanent seed. This is how your body is filled with light. But you could say like the ability to take off really in the inner world is tied a little bit more to the heart seed, or the seed, the physical permanent seed. Your ability to fly in the inner worlds is tied to this. And when soul energy comes in, the mental permanent seed, which is up in the pineal gland, we process information from the higher soul, but at some point that information drops into the heart and gets processed. And you could say like the heart seed is like kind of a guide, a guide that helps you navigate in the world. And the more one becomes aware of this heart seed, the more it can shift your perception and shift out of your normal everyday thinking and shift into being able to experience like deeper levels or states of consciousness. It's same with the mental seed, but they're different. You could also say there's the aspect that has to do with the soul in the mental permanent seed, but there's another aspect that doesn't get talked about a lot in spiritual aspects is spirit. And this is tied to that ability to fly in the inner worlds. And so, if you look at the idea of the assemblage point, it's just basically all these different pieces of information that you kind of see the world through. And your ability to shift your perception is tied to the heart seed. Your ability to break down your thoughts and repetitive thinking, that's all in the mental permanent seed. But perception, like, the ability to perceive things that are beyond your mind is tied more to the heart seed.
So is there like that we have the Blue Pearl meditation, is there a meditation for the heart seed to help develop it or purify?
There can be. Like anytime you're activating the heart, that's helpful, or the heart and the crown. And so, we have the meditation on the 1,000-petaled lotus helps to activate the crown and the mental permanent seed. But when you do anything that's super activating to the heart, will usually do that. You can put your awareness on the heart seed. The issue is it's a little bit harder to access. Like the pineal gland, you can kind of access it because you can kind of find the center of your head and keep exploring that area. The heart seed's a little bit harder. You can do it, but the reason why it doesn't get taught a lot openly is like sometimes you start perceiving things that are going to happen rather than what's happening right now. And sometimes you perceive things that shifts or changes, and it can be a little upsetting sometimes. And so there's practices that do it a little bit, but they don't talk about a lot. It's usually something that's done in an inner practice. I'm more than willing to go down that road if you guys want to, but but if you think about, if you look at the pictures of Christ, it's there are certain pictures where there's like a stream of red and a stream of white coming out of the heart of Christ. Have you ever seen that picture? And his hands is usually kind of like open like that. And there's like a big stream of like light coming out that's white and a big stream that comes out that's red.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now on my wall. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. And so yeah, this sounds weird, but it's the idea of Santa Claus. Santa Claus wears what? Red and white. And the idea of like the Vajra, like, or the Dorje, it's about the lightning bolt, right? And you could say the lightning bolt is associated with all the movement in the universe. And if you look at the reindeer of Santa Claus, all the reindeer have names that are associated with thunder or lightning. And then Rudolph has a red nose and is guiding the sleigh. That is like a metaphorical way of like describing what that heart seed does. It's like a kind of like this inner like guide that guides you through your life. And the more that you're aware of it, the more you can kind of maneuver in your life and work out maybe karmic issues that might be there. But whether you're aware of it or not, it's part of what helps to manifest the karmas in your life. Being aware of it helps you to like dissipate it, but it's not always like, oh, you should do this or you should do that. It's just like this kind of inner sense or inner knowing, or you'll feel guided to do something, and if somebody asks you, you'll go, I don't know why. Like I just, uh, I perceive something. I feel very guided to do this, but if you had to come up with a reason, you wouldn't be able to say, XYZ, this is why I'm doing this. It's tied to that that inner guide, or that bright red light that, because the physical seed or the heart seed is a brilliant red. And so uh, just like Rudolph guiding the sleigh, it's like guiding your movement through the inner worlds, you could say, or inner worlds, and even in your life. Most times we're not aware of it, though.
All right. Thank you very much. That was so helpful.
Yeah, I sit and I think about the whole thing with the idea of the reindeer and things like that, and then I don't know how much of that was done intentionally. Sometimes people are also guided to do something like that. The whole idea of the story of Santa Claus and the reindeer and everything. Um, that might have been intentional, but the idea of Rudolph, I think, was some sort of inspiration. Somebody, I can't remember how it got started, but um, they wrote the story about Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. And I don't know that it was like somebody bringing forth esoteric teachings, but they had some sort of inner guidance to put that forth. But I find it interesting. And the other thing that I find interesting is, we get told that there's this guy that comes and brings us gifts and everything. And so, when you're a little kid, there's also this realization of like, oh, Santa Claus isn't real. And I think that is also tied to that shift of perception, like where you grow up and you think, oh, there's this guy that comes down the chimney and brings me presents every year. And then you get a little older and you're like, it was just a story my parents told me. I think that also was a lesson where, we think a lot of things and we have perceptions and we're taught things and we have experiences. But when we look at it from a mystical point of view, at some point we have to shed the illusion or the perception of what that is, because there's something deeper. And you could say that like belief can be harmful to the mind, because it stops the mind, it stops you from inquiring about the nature of what's going on. You go, oh, I believe this, it's done, I've got to figure it out, I have all the answers, let's stick it on the shelf, I already know all this. And you grow up, when you're a little kid and you're like, oh, there's Santa Claus, and yada yada yada. And then you start to realize, oh, there's no Santa Claus, there's no Easter Bunny or whatever. And you're being taught at a very young age that just because you're told something or just because you believe something doesn't mean that it's real, doesn't mean that it's accurate. And it really kind of shows the trap of intellect. Like intellect goes through, it gathers up pieces of information, and then it's like, okay, I have this piece of information, this is what I believe. And it stops the mind from being curious, it stops the mind from inquiring. And if you want to develop the crown, which is the entry point of divine uh, divine energy coming in, part of that is being curious and inquiring. Like when somebody is really like full of belief and not curious, the crown doesn't really activate. The crown becomes more activated the more curious you are. You're always growing, you're always evolving, you're always seeking out truth. And that idea of shedding that belief that there's this man that comes down the chimney and brings you presents and then leaves, and judges you for good or bad or whatever, it kind of teaches you a pattern of just because I was taught this and just because my parents told me this, I still have to inquire. I still have to pursue truth. I still have to seek answers. You don't just believe it to believe it. And, there's this old mystical saying that I don't believe in believing, you know, because it is kind of degenerating to the mind. It stalls or stagnates the mind and keeps it from growing, evolving, and moving. And it doesn't mean that we don't gather information, but knowing is very different than believing, you know. So it's good to know, not so good to believe, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a wonderful piece on believing. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
yeah, yeah. What made you think of that? I'm just curious.
The heart seed.
Yeah.
Well, Judy and I started working through the booklets, and we started with assemblage point and using
Oh, nice.
assemblage point, and we
Right,
were reading in the booklet all the various aspects of the things it does.
right.
And we saw the heart seed, and we're familiar with the permanent seeds from the teachings.
Right. It's just a different way of saying the physical seed. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it wasn't, we weren't sure if the heart seed mentioned
Yeah.
there was the same. So, and hearing
Yeah.
you talk about it, it was incredibly great because it's
Yeah.
I haven't heard that explanation or anything about it in such a long time.
Yeah. 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 The old Santa Claus thing. Yeah.
And that Santa Claus, yeah, that Santa Claus reference is so interesting.
I have this cute little story. It's kind of related, but it kind of not. So I had these friends that had two little kids, and it's when the Batman movies were coming out, and they were like 4 and 5 or whatever, 4 and 6, and so whenever I would see them, we'd start laughing and talking and everything, and then I'd be real quiet and I'd look around and go, "Hey, I'm Batman." I would say to him every time I saw him, I was like, "But I'm Batman." And they'd get all excited and everything. And so, you know, the mom said, it was many years later, it was like 8 or 9. One was 9 and one was like 7. And I stopped off to see him real quick. And then I left. I was just passing through the area, and they had a friend over. And the friend, after I left, they said, the friend goes, "Hey, who was that?" And goes, "Oh, it's one of our friends. He thinks he's Batman." I don't know why that cracked me up, but it's still that same idea where, I mean, I wasn't doing it for any reason other than just playing with the kids, but it's still, we have those childhood things that we start believing, or we just go, this is the nature of reality. This is how things are. And, we kind of just believe them, and we stop like exploring it. We stop inquiring, we stop growing, we start pursuing truth. And when reality kind of sits in and you realize, oh, that wasn't accurate, it allows for the mind to keep growing and expanding, and it actually is tied to our spiritual growth and our spiritual evolution. And so that shedding of that misperception really sets the pattern for that when you start to turn inward and really start to have deeper spiritual experiences. um, it stimulates a process that keeps you looking and going more inward and exploring things that are beyond what the intellect perceives from the world. Because really, a lot of times we think of intelligence as like the accumulation of information, or knowing some details and facts. But really, if you look at intelligence, it's ability to take that information, observe things, and then apply something and produce a result, or handle yourself in very difficult situations. It's not about just, I've accumulated all this information and I've stuck it on the shelf, and like a library full of books, you go, look at all the things I know. That's too sterile. The ability to take that information and apply it, that's the key. And without observation, without inquiry, and being curious, we just kind of keep doing the same thing over and over again. There is no growth, there is no evolution. There's just you playing out the momentum of those things that you believe and perceive, and nothing ever shifts, grows, or evolves. And so, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're so good.
Go ahead, Priya.
Hey, Priya.
Hello, how are you?
Hey.
Last night I was doing materialization breathing just before bed, and I've done this practice so many times, and I've felt the energy a little bit around the head area. But
Mhm.
last night I was more observing it through my spinal column to my navel and back
Okay.
until the main. And it just felt like, it's such a small practice. It's just 8 or 9 breaths,
Right.
cycles, but it feels like it is so potent.
Yes.
And that energy movement was so full on that I wanted to know more about what it really does. What is it? And
Well, I mean, you bring up a good point. So when you're doing the materialization breath, and for those of you, just a little quick review, so at the start we do the Lama Yoga, which is, the chin down to the chest. We inhale through our nose, moving the head up, and then exhale through the mouth down. The materialization breath is that same movement, but there's a throat lock with it. So your head is down, you inhale, hold your breath, move your head up, and then you exhale, and then down, inhale, hold your breath, up, exhale. And so that variation, that part with the throat lock, is you're materializing light into the form. You're basically materializing light into the elements. And so another way of saying that is you're materializing light into, like, also your lower centers or your lower nature. And if you look at from the navel down, those centers are associated with your lower nature. Your solar plexus is kind of the combination of your higher nature and lower nature. And then the heart up is more your higher nature. And so the navel is the center that regulates those lower centers. In the Ming Men, it moves energy up, but one of the things that also does is it takes energy and can move it down to help physicalize something. And so here you're physicalizing light. And so when you go through and you're doing the materialization breath, you're not materializing necessarily your thought, you're materializing light into the area where you're directing it. So it could be a thought, could be a feeling, it could be something you're looking at, and then you're physicalizing it into the form. And so it goes from the Ming Man, it drops it down to the sex chakra, and then eventually into the basic, and then there's like a download of that light down into the earth, and you're affecting the elements in your body. But when it goes from the basic and then drops down into the earth, you're starting to drop light into that area down below your feet. And that's starting to mix with the elements that are the building blocks that you tend to pull up. And so that area below your feet is associated with the things you've cultivated in your life. Right. So if you've had a lot of good thoughts, there's an energy or like a depth that is below your feet. And if you've done a lot of like negative thinking or whatever, there's also that below your feet. So when you're doing the materialization breath, you're kind of undoing the negative thinking of the past or the negative feelings, and you're kind of cultivating a more like positive or more spiritualized aspect that's down below your feet. And at first you're hitting the area that has to do more with your like your lower nature, your animalistic nature. But if you kind of pierce through all of that, you end up hitting an area where you start experiencing peace no matter what. No matter how chaotic your world is, you're still experiencing that peace because your feet is on top of this light or these building blocks that have been filled with light or have been spiritualized.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Such a good
Another
practice for
question.
you to do. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, I feel the peace, so it does work. But I wanted to ask you one more question on the same
Sure.
topic. What happens if we do more than 8 or 9 by accident?
Oh, that's fine. I mean, ideally, it's anything more than 4. Like 4 has the effect of materializing the light, and then after that, it's all gravy. So if you did 10 or 11 or 12, it's not so much the number, it's just you keep generating more light. And so, there's been times where I've done like, 15, 20, 25, but it starts making you pretty spacey. So it's good to always have like a gap. Like you can do it and then wait for a minute or two and then do it again, because in that gap, you're generating more energy or more light to then materialize again. So it's good to like do it, take a wait for a minute or two, and then do it again, and then wait a minute or two, and then again, rather than just firing through and doing a whole bunch of them. But if you do 10 instead of 9, no big deal.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. And so, boy, that went by really quick. We're going to jump over to mystic vibration, but let's continue this. I had a practice we are going to do, but I think the questions are very good. So as long as we have questions, we'll keep doing this. We're posting the link and then we'll see you over there in just a minute.